In the early 20th century, over 86 small one- or few-room schools served African American, Monacan, and Caucasian students in racially segregated settings in Amherst County, Virginia. These schools were community-based. One could be found every few miles, often next to a neighborhood church. Students attended the closest school serving their race and age group. In the following interviews, African American students share what it was like to attend school during Amherst County's segregated one-room education era. 1-, 2-, and 3-room schools dotted the southern half of Amherst County from Monroe to the James River. Turner Ware School, also known as the Ware School. An early southern Amherst County school. Interviews with Mary Jackson and Roosevelt Christian.
My mother, she used to tell me she went to Ware School. Because I remember asking her one time, why didn't she go down here to Scott Zion School? And she told me, she said, well, my mother's, I think it was her granddaddy. He either gave the name for the school or the school was built on his land. And she said my mother, they called it Ware School, and said her mother made her walk all the way to, they call it Turner Town, to Ware School, because that was her granddaddy gave the name for the school or something like that.
It was a log school, one little room log school with a heater sitting in the middle of the floor. Mrs. Green would ring the bell and we would go on in and start our classes. Had geography, had speller and reading, arithmetic, hygiene. When I stopped in 7th grade, we graduated. My sister really was still going. She had another year. So Mrs. Green taught me civics for a while till she finished. And that's it. And then lots of days she would let me teach the little Crawley boy. I had to have his reading because, you know, she had the others she was doing. She let me have, because I had finished school.
There was no high school in Madison Heights. I think it was the 6th or 7th grade. That's as far as you could go in free school.
I got my diploma in 7th grade. And all of us that in that year got, and as far as the public schools went in that day. And then we had beautiful exercise, clothings. Lord, we had the beautiful clothing. I often think about it.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, Mrs. Green made us little paper dresses, and it was beautiful and had a little ruffle on them. And we had a play, and we had to march out in the yard and we get them little United States little flags. And we marched and made USA. And Mr. Silas Bird was our drum beat man. He could beat a drum. We each had 2 little flags, and we flopped them over our heads and wrote, made the U, and then we come back as A. It was beautiful, honey.
St. Domingo School, also known as Singo-Mingo. Built in approximately 1908. Interview with Russell Lee.
Well, it was a one-room school, and the classes were so we had to sit according to the class that we was in. 1st grade was set in the front, 2nd grade in the back, 3rd grade, 5th and 6th grade. And you were called by your grade. She would say, Ms. Ewell would say, 1st grade. 1st graders would get up and go sit in the front. And That's the way we were called, according to the way, the grade that you was in. I remember arithmetic. We would add and subtract. We'd go to the board, to the blackboard. They had a blackboard right behind Miss Ewell. She had her desk set here. Then they had a blackboard. And we would read, and we would do our homework. You were all in one room. So really, from the first to the sixth grade, you kind of learn if you paid attention. But you know, being kids, we only paid attention to what we was assigned our grade. So I was always interested in reading, and I remember that the superintendent used to bring us books from other schools, and I thought they were new books, but they was used book from the other schools, and that was exciting. I was more or less a history buff. I loved to read, and I used to be interested in their books. We had a stove there, and the boys was assigned to make the fire, and then off from the classroom you had a coal bin. After we got the fire going, we would go in and put coal in there, and that would last all day. Then the boys was assigned to go to the spring. We would like that because we had to go down a long hill. We would start out with a full bucket of water coming back, but by the time we got to the top, it was about half full. Then we would bring it, put it on a table. They had one dipper. The dipper was curved. It would fit over the bucket, and whenever we wanted to go drink water, we would just have little small plastic cups. Everybody used the same utensils.
Oh. So y'all didn't have little individual little cups. Y'all had like one or two little cups.
It was not a lot of concern about health issues then, because we was quite healthy, and everybody just, if one had a cold, everybody in the whole school caught the cold, because we were just jammed in there together.
Chestnut Grove School. Built in approximately 1906. Interviews with Mary Woodruff, Darnell Woodruff Winston, Darnett Woodruff Hill, and Robert Perry.
It was rough inside, and the floors were rough, and if I remember correctly, there was no paint job in there. It was just a rough building. One room at that time. Then after, while I was still in school, they added on 2 rooms. For a while, I think we had benches. Because I can remember they would make me come up, if I talked too much, to sit on the front bench where the teacher could see me. I think eventually we had the wooden desks, but when I started, there were benches. But then we had the slates, because I remember I had one.
Who was your teacher?
Now, the teacher was a man. His name was Grant Gardner.
All right, so Mr. Gardner was your teacher.
Yeah.
All right, what did you think about Mr. Gardner?
Oh, Mr. Gardner, what I can remember about him, and what people always gave him that name, he was the best. He was a good teacher. I always thought he was mean, but he was good. He was good with the children, and back there, you know, the children got whippings, and I got plenty of them. I got plenty of them in school. They whipped me.
And why?
Because I talked too much. And that was one reason I got one. I talked too much. And then if he would give you an assignment and wanted you to get the assignment at home and bring him the report, if you didn't have it, you didn't get no recess. Now, Mr. Gardner was hard on us. He was really hard on us. And I can remember that, but we had buddies, and I had a boyfriend.
Who was your boyfriend?
If I can remember later on I had the same one that I got now, that I had, that died in 98. He was my boyfriend and I married him.
It was the Stallings, it was the Woodruffs, it was the Johnsons, it was the Dawsons, it was the Walls, and it was the Hostlers. That was all. And half of them was kin, and half of them was not kin.
We would all come in, and of course the teacher had a little hand bell, and I remember that bell now, it had a little crack because it had been there forever.
It was a 2-room building with a cloakroom, we called it, and dirt, a lot of dirt on the floor and wooden floors. We had to sweep every day, just those 2 rooms. Teacher was Mr. Ford. He was a wonderful teacher.
Now, I didn't like him.
Why not?
He was too strict. He really was. And I can tell you a story about him.
Okay.
Yeah, back at that time, the school teacher would whoop you. And he whooped me, and he messed that finger up. He bruised it. So my father come in on Friday, and he said that I told him how he bruised my finger. Well, my father had been drinking a little bit. So my father said, come Monday morning, he gonna be a dead school teacher. Wait a minute. So the whole weekend, my mother told him, Big Robert, you know you ain't gonna kill that school teacher. Yep, come Monday morning, he gonna be a dead school teacher. So come Monday morning, I'm gonna make a shout. Come Monday morning, I want to know outside, we lived in the apple orchard then at Chestnut Grove. I want to sit over on the porch. So my daddy said, the boy said, why are you sitting there? I said, I'm waiting you to go and kill the school teacher. He looked at me and said, if you don't get up here and go to school, I'm going to kill you. And I went on to school. But he wasn't going to do nothing nowhere. He was just talking, you know.
Getting that paddling on, he just turned your hand back, and I don't know what it was for, probably not doing my homework, but Mr. Ford, he was a dark-skinned man, and he always wore a sparkling white shirt, and he just reminded me of Sidney Poitier. He was a handsome man, and I remember that was something that I'll never forget, is the way he would just take your hand and bend it back and really give you a good paddling in it. So I remember him more than anything else.
Our teacher, Mr. Ford, would have a lesson plan that would fit, believe it or not, all of us. And at some times, I'm sure things were geared to the lower grades, but there were, at any time, I don't think there were more than maybe 15 of us. So most of the lessons, were used among the whole group. I just remember looking out the windows and we could see deer, turkeys, and in the fall we watched the acorns fall. So I just remember those type things.
What did you eat for lunch?
Oh, we always had to bring our own lunch. And I was one of the lucky ones. My mother ran a little teeny grocery store. So we had bologna sandwiches, and some of the other kids who had tuna fish that their mothers made, they wanted the bologna. So we would trade a lot of times.
I had a meat slicer, and I could slice bologna, and they love bologna. But I don't remember what I used to specially have for them right now. But I had a lot of things like honey buns, and what else?
We had ginger snaps and all kinds of goodies, little Mary Janes and things like that. We didn't care too much about the sandwiches, but I do remember having lots of Mary Janes and mint juleps. We enjoyed our lunches. We usually provided a lot of things for the other kids. We had recess after lunch, and we may have had a little break before, but yes, we did have recess after lunch, and we would all if the weather permitted us, we'd go outside. And
It was great. We had one room was a classroom. The other room was in case it rained and we couldn't go outside or it snowed, we would have our recess in that other room. It was a large open room where we could wrap the maypole, or in the summertime or in the wintertime, we could play little games. And so that was our recess room when we couldn't go outside.
I can remember if it snowed, then we would, which is a no-no now, I'm sure we would slide in the snow. We would have a little sliding contest to see who could slide along without falling. So that was, I remember that. It was my sister broke her arm doing that.
I remember distinctly having recess in the snow, and it wasn't snowing, but we had a snow, and we had boots on, and we just went outside and we skated around on the ice in our boots, and I happened to fall, and I broke my arm.
Oh, no.
I broke my arm, and we had to walk back to my house, which was about a half a mile, and somehow it hurt when I held it myself. So my girlfriends and my other little boyfriends, they all gathered around and they would hold it for me, and we walked back to my house. They had to hold it. It hurt if they didn't hold it. I don't know why that was, but I was in a lot of pain, and they held my arm for me, and we walked across the path, a cow pasture. We didn't go the road, because if we had went down the road, it would have taken a lot longer, and that was a long way. So at one point we had to get over a fence, and so we had to stop, and they had to hold my arm while I got over the fence, and I finally got home. And I actually had a broken arm, and so I was out of school for a few days.
Scott Zion School. Built in approximately 1906. Interviews with Roosevelt Christian, Bernard Jackson, Dorothy Jackson, Samuel Jackson, Irving Reed, and James Reynolds.
On my way to school, there was a sawmill that used to be right there now, where I think Clarence Wesley lived now. And I used to always like to watch the people run the sawmill. And a lot of times I'd be late for school because I'd just forget I'm on the way to school and stop and watching them. Oh, and my sister was always, come on here, you're going to be late.
Oh my goodness, was it in a church in the neighborhood, anything like that?
Yeah, the church was next door. Actually, the school was built on the church property.
It was just a community school. We had two teachers, Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. And I think Mrs. Robinson, she taught like the first and second grade. And Mr. Robinson taught the higher grades. I think we only went to like sixth grade there.
I thought it looked good back there then, but when I look at the pictures now, it don't look too hot. It was a two-room school, weatherboard with a tin top. And Ms. Robinson she taught me through the third grade. And then her husband was a teacher. He taught me through third through the sixth grade, Mr. Robinson.
Oh, so there was only two teachers in that whole school?
Just two teachers. And at one time, we were going to school all day from 9 to 3. And then somewhere in that time, the kids, with so many kids in the community, that they couldn't get all the kids in the school at one time. So what we did, we had to go, some went from 9 to 12, and some had to come from 12 to 3.
It was all the kids in the neighborhood that was of school age. And that encountered what now is Gauss Mill Road and Dixie Airport Road and all that area, City Domingo, all this area. So it was probably quite a few kids.
Well, it was a weatherboarded building, and it was a two-room school. It had a divided section in between the schools with the stoves and the desks for each section. And the teachers, they had their desks, sitting up front where they teach from. Then outside we had what we call the coal house, the joiner houses, and the boys took care of keeping the fires going, putting coal in, and then we would have to go to the spring, which was across the road, and down in the bottom of the hill to get water. And to us, I mean, we looked forward to doing the chores that we had to do, as well as being in the classes.
We would sweep the floor sometimes. You know what, dust is off. We did the blackboard. That was about it.
Well, we had arithmetic, little, and spelling. You had a spelling book with, just to call it the speller. They didn't have about 3 books. I remember, you don't hear that in Iraq.
Hold on, tell us about it.
I don't remember all that much about him, with the chicken and all that stuff. He was a little child, but he had chicken and ducks and all, but he was reading, different ones, the ducks, yellow ducks, and I don't know what kind of chicken. There's a whole lot of reading about him. Some of them could rehearse the whole book,
If we had reading first, then we would go into another subject, and after that, you'd have recess, maybe come back and whatever. Right. But it wasn't like, I'm going to teach you over here, and over here we're doing something else that I can't remember.
So in other words, how you said the first, second, third, and fourth grade, you all probably had different books, but everybody was reading at the same time.
Something like that. What do you know? It's been a long time.
Do you remember what reading book you had?
Okay.
Was it Dick, Spot, and Jane? Or was it Baby Ray?
I don't remember Baby Ray. I know Jane was in it.
Well, lunchtime we would go outside, and I think we would get an hour for lunch. We would go outside. Some of us would shoot marbles. We call it pugs.
Hopscotch, jump rope, stuff like that.
I remember playing ball and running through the woods. Then all we could do.
So what kind of ball did y'all play?
I remember it was just a little rubber ball, tennis ball we played with. Baseball, but never had no hard ball to play with.
Do you remember anything about the 5th grade?
Not very much.
You quit school in the 5th grade to go help
on the farm.
On the farm. Was this the family farm?
Yeah, part of it. They had the family farm and sharecroppers too. They had both. I didn't decide I wanted to, but I had to do it. I could quit school. I had to go to work to help keep so we could have something to eat, I guess.
Ivy Hill School. Built approximately 1929. Interview with Robert Perry.
Who attended the Ivy Hill School? What area did the kids come from?
Well, all of them came from Neoley, and all of them was in a mile or 2 radius. And it was I recall who went there. It was the Browns, it was the Ellises, it was the Mosbys, it was the Ruckers, it was the McCrays, and it was the Perrys, and it was the Smiths. That was all. 6 kids per grade,
So about maybe 36 kids?
Right,
total?
something like that, It was just a one-room class with a teacher with a desk at the back of the front door, and the teacher sat at the back of the school. And like I said, it had that pot-belly stove, and it had the pencil trimmer was on the wall, and you had to raise your hand if you want to go trim your pencil. And to tell the truth, I was not really used to that, because when it was in Washington, D.C., we had a great big school. And then at Ivy Hill, we had, this is what we called it, an outdoor toilet. And see, I was not familiar with that. And I had to go back to my mother and ask, I'm used to the bathroom inside. And at that time, we had the outdoor bathroom. And for boys had their one and the girls had theirs. That was parents that was well to do. When I say well to do, I mean middle class. Huh? Buying new cars. Now look, they had light bread. And the ones that was not well to do, they had biscuits. And I didn't like canned biscuits, but I carried them. Because you didn't have nothing else to eat, And right now, I look back on it. I had the best bread. But I just didn't want it because for instance, you had light bread. And you take your light bread, you'd hold it up and let everybody see it. And the one that had a biscuit would hide it. But that was just because you was a child. And if you think back on it, you had good bread. Good, healthy bread, And you had fatback, or you had salmon cakes. Sometimes you had chicken in your biscuits. And because I didn't like preserves, so my mother wasn't putting on the preserves in mine. I thought that was real not down to earth.
And do you remember the name of the teacher?
Yes. Look, back in my time, you was called Mrs. or Mr. by your last name, and her name was Mrs. Shelton. She worked real good, and to tell the truth, it was up to you to learn, because she couldn't really just work with you one-on-one. When she went to the 5th grade class, she had to work with them, and the rest of the kids be doing something else. But she would give you something that you would be working on, whether it was reading, writing, arithmetic, history, English. It was real good. I mean, you learned. You didn't learn but a little that day, but what you learned, you never did forget it.
Madison Heights Negro School. A 2-room early Southern Amherst County school. Interview with Hazel Thompson.
When there was a windstorm, I don't know, my father was in construction, so I understand right much about construction. But I never understood how the building, the 2 rooms would separate. I mean, they would actually lean apart, and they seemed to have been fastened at the bottom. But the top would lean and everybody would run for the door.
When you went to Madison High School, how'd you feel about going to that 2-room school, knowing?
Well, it's all I ever knew, and when I was young, it was all I knew, and it was just a way of life. And I didn't really think anything about it. And after I got older, then I, could see what was up the street. I remember that the bus would pass us all the time picking up the white kids, and we walked a mile, and some kids walked much further than that. We knew that we were paying the same taxes that everybody else was paying. And that was this nice big school for the white kids. And we were in this 2-room school with outdoor toilets and go to the spring and get your own water and all this, So we knew that we deserved better. 7th grade was as far as you could go.
And was there any other school in the county that you could go on to? There wasn't?
No.
So people couldn't take the bus up to Amherst Training School, or did anybody
They didn't allow it.
They didn't?
You could if they allowed it, but they didn't allow it.
What about Dunbar or some school in Lynchburg?
Well, now, a couple of kids I know did go to Lynchburg and went to Dunbar, but you had to pay a fee to go to a school that was out of your district, and the average person couldn't afford it. We fought and fought and fought to get a better school, and they kept telling us they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it, and finally they told us at the school board that if we would raise a certain amount of money, that they would build us a school. And we sold hot dogs, hamburgers, and cupcakes, and I think sometime we'd even have ice cream. when I got grown, I made pigs in the blankets and wrapped them up and carried them up there and sold them at lunchtime. And we raised money, and we raised the amount of money that we were required to raise. And they built the school for us.
In 1939, a new brick school replaced the earlier two-room Madison Heights School. It was officially called the Madison Heights School for Negroes, but was commonly known as Madison Heights Colony Road. This school housed grades 1 through 11.